Without further ado, we present to you our guest speaker for the evening, Pierre Greene.
Good evening and thank you. I'd like to thank the MBL for this opportunity to join you all tonight. Before I get started, we want this to be interactive. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And Ms. Shorts, would you monitor the chat or just raise your hand so we can make sure we address your question? Because the goal is this: when we get off this call, I want to make sure something is said that that has motivated you, that has answered your questions for the reason why you got on this call. All right. So building your book of business, how to set up your first 30, 60, and 90-day plan. I want to give this disclaimer. Every business is different. Every industry is different. So it may not fit your industry directly, but you're going to have to make some tweaks to whatever your business model is. I'll take a step back and explain to you why my wife and I started All In Consulting Firm. We realize that it's a lot of people that are in business, but they don't understand the business. They know their trade or their discipline. For example, if you're a lawyer, you understand law, but you may not understand how to manage employees, how to market yourself and things of that nature. So we saw that it was a communication issue with a lot of business owners. So this is where this company was birthed out of. So that's All In Consulting Firm. We can go to the first slide, the next slide, please.
Are you seeing it on your end?
No. Nope, I'm not, but it's all right. I got it.
Okay, what about now?
Still nothing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull it up as well.
What about now?
Still not moving, nothing's happened. I see something trying to happen, which is no problem. We're all good. I got it. So when we talk about building your book of business, the next slide is the first thing you gotta understand is know who's playing. Basically, we have to understand our market. Like you just mentioned, with this pandemic, every business owner is required to make a pivot. And so what we used to know about our market is completely different. The way we used to do business, it has changed, it has evolved, and we must do so as well. So as a business owner, it's important to understand your market. You have to spend these next 30 days or the first 30 days in your business understanding what is different about your market. What do we have to do different? I use the analogy of file cabinets. If you go back to the 80s and 90s, file cabinets were prevalent. Everyone had file cabinets. Today, they're obsolete. No one has a file cabinet. So if you're in the industry of making file cabinets, you're gonna waste your time and that market's gonna pass you by. So I think it's so important to understand your market. And when I say know who's playing, understand the competition. Understand the competition. It's okay to do the research and figure out what is if I'm Walmart, what is Costco's doing that I'm not doing? Or what is Target doing that I'm not doing? What are they doing different during this time? We are seeing a lot of businesses that are going out of business because they're not able to make that pivot. The market has changed. And the most prevalent story, if you're around my age, you remember Blockbusters. I remember being a kid going to Blockbusters on Friday night. You get to pick a movie, then you stand in line and you had that long line of candy. I have a sweet tooth, so don't judge me. And the greatest thing about that time is you knew you was gonna get a movie, and Blockbuster did not evolve. They could have been the Netflix of the 90s if they had went to a digital streaming services, but they didn't wanna make that pivot. So I say that as a business owner, understand your market, and this is what you need to spend time on in the first 30 days. Understanding the competition and what your market will look like in the future. If you're still stuck on the way it used to do it, you're gonna get left behind. And then in the next 60 days, know your value. I stress this because I see so many business owners that are chasing the dollar, but it does not align up with who the company is, who you are as a business. And so trying to get the quick check will prevent you from getting the consistent check. It's easy to get the first check, but it takes skill and hard work to get the check to come consistently. So you have to ask yourself this: what separates you in this workplace? What is your value proposition? What are you bringing to the table that's different from everyone else? You need to define that in your first 60 days. And if you've done any research and it talks about businesses, I always recommend with new hires to sit down and do a 30, 60-day plan with them. And the reason why I say that is because it gives you actionable items that you can be able to hold them accountable and give you a better understanding if they're a good fit. I don't know about you, but I've made mistakes in hiring the wrong people. And when you hire the wrong people, it can set your business back. And so the beauty of having this 30 and 60 and 90-day plan, it allows you to weed out the right person or the wrong person. All right. So know your value. You should understand what you're worth. And if it's not in your target market, don't go after it. Many of us, we get caught up on the want to make a dollar. We have responsibilities, we have bills. I understand that. And the mistake we make is we start chasing money, and we chase some of the wrong contracts, and we put ourselves in a bad situation. The worst thing you can do as a business is have a bad representation. If you have a bad reputation, it's going to hinder you from getting future opportunities. We live in Richmond, and we all know Richmond is a small city. And now that the world is becoming even more global, we're all 2 to 3 connections away from someone or that next contract. So you got to make sure that your reputation is right. So it goes back into truly understanding your value. And it's important for your employees, the people that are on your team, to understand the value, their value they bring to the team, and what the organization's core values are as a whole. So the first 30 days, know who your market is. The 60-day mark, you have to know your value. And then know your goals. I'm pretty sure you've all heard of the SMART acronym, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time. This is so important that your goals should align up with these methods. And it's important to be very specific with our goals. So many of my business owners come to me and say, well, I want to make $1 million. And you say, okay, I understand that. Everybody does. And when you say, give me something more specific, they have a tough time trying to understand something that is very specific that they can attain in the immediate future. And then once you identify your specific goal, it's important to have something to be able to measure it by. What is your gold stamp, or what is your seal of success? And that's something that you and your team need to strategize on and talk about. And then you got to make sure your goal is attainable. It may not be realistic for you to make $1 million in a month if that's what you have not done in the past. Or you don't have the right infrastructure to support that. So you got to make sure your goal is very realistic or attainable. And probably my most favorite part of this acronym is being relevant. Is your goal relevant? If you're like many of us, when the first of the year come around, or towards the end of the year, around the fourth quarter, we start writing out our goals or our business plans. And we try and identify what we want to get accomplished and what we want to do. And it becomes the same thing from the year prior. We just carry it over. And what the component that we're missing during this place is what's not relevant. That goal is no longer relevant to where you're at as a business or where the market is. And then the final one is time. You have to put a timetable behind every goal. Setting a goal without a timetable is no different from having a piece of paper and you just putting it in your drawer. It's going to get old. You're not going to look at it. And so knowing your goals in your first 90 days, I feel like if you have these basics, these are some of the basics of business. And the thing I like about this, it can apply to many industries. Whether you're in banking, whether you're in merchant services, whether you're in manufacturing, it's important to understand these 30, 60, 90 goals. And so when we talk about a plan, when we talked about knowing your market, spend the time to do the research. Don't go based on your experience. Your experience is outdated. I look at it like an Apple phone. these phones come out with so many updates. And so you can have an iPhone 11, but not have the most recent update, and your phone is not going to perform the way you want it to. And it's the same way with our industry. Many of our industries are fast-paced, fast-changing. So it's very important that we understand our market. We're going to put a pause there. Do we have any questions?
I think, no, we don't have any questions in the chat, but we welcome participants to ask any questions now. You can raise your hand, or you can type it in the chat and I can ask a question on your behalf. Okay. Okay. Not, well, we have a raised hand. So Joe Raspberry has a question. Let me. Okay. All right, Joe, you're on.
Okay, will we be able to get a copy of this presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I'm taking notes so that way I can keep up by not taking notes.
Okay.
Let me ask you guys this. What industries are you guys in? Can someone tell me some of the industries that you're in?
I'm in real estate.
Okay. All right. Now, for someone that's in real estate, do you have event industry, accounting, do you all have any software where you're able to track your clientele, track your business?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Because that's so important.
I'm sorry, we call it SAP.
Okay. It's so many
CRM.
CRMs out there. Yes. Yeah. So I always recommend understanding how to be able to track what are we sending in 30, 60, 90 days. Another mistake that we make is we have to understand our sales cycle. So from the point of contact with a potential client to the end where I get a sale, how long is that? How many touches do it take? That's important to understand when you talk about really understanding the revenue that you got coming in. Because if you have bills or rent that you need to pay for your employees, payroll, and so forth like that in 30 days, you probably can't wait 90 days to get their first check. So you need to really understand your sales cycle. Yeah, that's so important. And this will be a lot simpler if you've been in the business for 10, whatever industry in for 5, 10 years, because you actually have a bigger book. But for someone that's just starting out, this is from brand new, you just started your business last week. The first thing I would tell you is to really look at your natural market. As you're understanding your market, look at who do you already know that is in that market. Because the first thing we want to do is figure out who can I contact, all right?
We also have Pierre attendees that are in the event industry as well as accounting.
All right, well, let's talk about the event industry for a second. Getting hit hard.
Yeah.
And you know, people are afraid to travel. It is rough, and I'm definitely praying for you guys because it is rough. People are apprehensive about getting on the plane, definitely not getting on the boat no time. So, yourself, what other services can you provide? And you got to look at that. Where you may have made all your money on organizing trips, maybe you need to start looking at doing local events. Or how can you do more virtual experiences? I just saw that, virtual, right, yeah. Doing virtual experience, because you gotta think about it. If I can have a virtual experience and still get the same relief or impact, it may be worth your while. And I would also tell you, I don't know if y'all have ever heard the old saying, spend 80% of the time with that 20% of your book of the business. If you have a book of business, and it's true in every industry, about 20% of your clientele that is really spending the most amount of money with you. They're getting the most amount of services, whether it's they're booking the most vacations, they're consistently having you come in and cut their yards or their businesses and things of that nature. We make a mistake and we spend too much time on that other half of our book of business that really don't value us. And I really want to stress, you know, you have to know your value because as an entrepreneur, I know what it's like. I'm married, I got 3 boys. I know what it's like to, you know, you got to make ends meet. And so what happens is you have a tendency to take cases or take clients that you probably shouldn't. So be mindful of that. So if you only focus on trying to work with the people that you enjoy and cultivate those relationships. You know, moving from Chicago to Virginia, one thing I had to learn was things were slower down here. In order to do business, people wanted to get to know you. They wanted to know where you were from. They wanted to know your family history. Being from the North, if you had a good product and it benefited me, it was fine. So, right, cultivate existing relationships. That's so important. Yes. What other questions? Any other questions? During this time loss, how long do you wait to let go of client? Okay. All right, Ms. Taylor, how you doing this evening? The question she said is, during this time of loss, how long do you wait to let go of a client? You got to ask yourself, it's not a one shoe fit all. It's based on how many different products or services do you provide this one client? If you provide 10 services, meaning, because I think you're in accounting, so if you're doing their taxes, you're doing their payroll, and you're doing some other type of bookkeeping form, those are 3 lines or 3 streams of income you got coming in. If they're not fitting with what you're aligned, you got to ask yourself, if you lose this account, how that affects you financially. If it's going to put you out of business, you may have to bite the bullet a little longer, where you build up your book and get more clients and more resources before you allow them to go. And so it's really hard to say a timetable, because I don't want you to lose them tomorrow and you were going to make $15,000, $20,000 off of them. So it's really based on how many services you provide. If you only provide one service for them and they're really not aligning with what you're trying to do, it's okay to let them go. And understand this, your market will constantly evolve, so you can't do the research in your market today and think you're set, and 5 years come along and you're left behind. And your goals should evolve. What you're focused on today, 5 years from now, as your business grows, you may be a shop of just 3 people. Well, 5 years, you may have 15. So your goals need to evolve and change, and that's okay. So this 30, 60, 90 day is something that I would recommend doing, especially if you're in a slump, if you're just starting out, if you're in a slump, or if you've been in the business and you just feel like you're just coasting. The first 5 years of any business is critical. That is where the rubber meets the road. This is what will determine if you're going to be able to be a long-term business or you're going to be out of business. So understand that.
Okay.
I'm trying to read the questions.
Yeah. We have someone on the that's one of our participants that is in landscaping and interior landscaping industry.
Okay. So interior landscaping industry, give me a little bit insight on that market.
That is Beth Gay. So I am going to allow Beth to talk Beth, are you there?
Yes, I am. We do interior landscape for commercial properties, office buildings, offices, medical facilities, airport, things like that.
So, Beth, have you been in contact with your current clients and to figure out what are their protocols for reopening? And then
yes, we have. We provide service for those clients, and we've communicated, done a lot of work with them to maintain contact and have access during this time. And we've managed to continue services for about 70 or 80% of our clients. except for, like retirement homes, things like that. They're just
Right.
not even in the question. But what we're looking at more is, what are you seeing with people looking towards, changing office setups and trying to accommodate for social distancing and things like that. So that's kind of what we're trying to focus on in our market and how we can help with that. You have any input?
Yes, great question. Got a great idea for you. Everything is 6 feet spacing. It will look it would be appealing to the eye to have plants or flowers or some decorative is basically what you do instead of having tape on the floor saying stand here, stand here. If you can use your flowers or your design essentially as the marker, it looks good. And everyone wants something that looks good. Right now, we're just putting out the basic tape and we have these big shields everywhere. If you can get something that's going to be appealing to the eye, people will pay for that. Especially when you look at some of these, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with like what's a tier 1 office, tier 2 and so forth, how they have to look a certain way. That's where you can really bring your value and say, instead of having this tape, we can let you know your markers are these plants or this shrub or whatever it may be. So I think it's more important for you to create, they don't see this. So you have to create the vision for that. And this is where your strong suit comes in. This is where your gifting comes in at, because most businesses are just focusing on, this is what we do, but they need to understand the benefit of now having fresh flowers, fresh plants in your office, that natural air, how it can really help and so forth. So I think you have to really highlight how you can add value. Because if you don't call them or if you're not in front of them, the first thing they're going to do, they're going to look at, how do I cut costs? Does that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you very much.
Good.
And that's kind of that is the main focus of our direction right now.
Yeah.
And particularly like for existing clients, how can we help them create barriers, dividers between their
Yes.
employees, use plants to help traffic flow,
Yes.
things like that.
Right.
So, and then hopefully at some point focus on some new prospects that don't have plants.
Yeah.
But nobody knows how they're doing it yet. So anyway, but thank you very much for your input.
But create the plan. Yeah. All right. Any other industries? I said we had real estate, event planning, interior design, landscaping, exterior, interior. What other industries do we have on the call with us? Like I said at the onset, I really want to make this about you guys. I can talk for days, but if it's not relevant to you, it's pointless. All right. While we're still getting questions to come in, I'm gonna highlight the SMART method, the SMART acronym. Let's talk about that a little bit. Yeah, with the SMART method acronym, being very specific with your goals. If you have a team of 3 other than yourself, it's important to make sure that they are in this process with you. Many of us that sit in the C office, the C suites, we come up with these big visions and these big ideas and we share them and it does not come to fruition. And we're wondering why, what's going on? Well, it's because we didn't get the input from those that are going to carry out the work with us. So I think it's very important to bring your team and make it a collaborative effort. In light of the pandemic, it's important that leadership becomes a shared process and not just a dictatorship. You do as I say. You have to really get in the trenches with your employees and really find out what motivates them. And once you understand what motivates them and what makes them tick, they'll have more buy-in to the goals. And it makes it very specific. And you'll be surprised at some of the ideas that your team will come up with. All right. Healthcare staffing. Woo. That is thank you for what you do. That is a hot commodity. Everyone is looking for healthcare staffing. I think your goal is not to just hire anyone. To really be, you have to be selective, because everyone that say they work for your company, they're a direct representation of you. So if they cut one corner, they're not going to say that person cut the corner. They're going to say Greene Staffing Agency cut the corner. And you may not have never met that client. So it's very important, goes back to understanding your value. Because there's such a high demand, that does not mean that we're going to take anything. You have to make sure that the persons or the individuals that you're hiring, they are a direct reflection of you, and they have the core values and the morals that you want to see. All right. So that's the first thing I would do, is just don't get overwhelmed because you got a stack of resumes on your desk and you realize I just need people and I'm gonna take them, because half the people, if it was pre the pandemic, you probably wouldn't even hire. So don't do it now. All right. I hope that helps. Outside bills and payroll. Advice on how to use loans and grants received during this payroll, during this time. So I think you may be talking about the PPP or the CARES Act. And so what I would tell you, to your clients that are receiving those grants and those loans, make sure they follow the guidelines. So what you need to do is you have to become an expert on the guidelines. You have to tell them where they can spend it and how they can spend it. Because if you follow the small business .gov and you go to their website, the guidelines for how to use the PPP, for example, is very vague. And a lot of the banks that are lending the money out, they're still very vague on it. So I think it's going to be very important for you to understand how that loans work, because you have to be a wealth of knowledge. You got to understand that they're getting these loans, they're getting these grants, and they're trying to focus on, how do I save my business? How do I stay afloat? So this is where I think you can really show your expertise by being the subject matter expert. If you can understand how they work and what's the most efficient way to track their funds, track the loans, track the grants, and to pay their bills, they will see value in what you do, and you solidify that relationship in their services. They will continue to maintain you. When we have a pandemic or a recession, the first thing we do is we see, what don't I need? And so we only get rid of things that we don't believe bring us value. If I believe you bring me value, how absurd it may sound to someone else, it doesn't matter, because to me, you bring value. So you have to make sure that you knowing your value proposition, knowing what separates you from everyone else. Because I guarantee you, some of the bigger payroll services, they're probably not taking the time to talk to their clients. They're just saying, they send them their invoices and keep them moving. All right. Hopefully that helps, Sharon. All right. And so the next step was being measurable, going back to the SMART acronym. How do you measure? So for someone that's in event planning, how do you measure a goal? Is it based on how many events you book in a month, or how many actual contracts paid in full? How do you measure that? You need to identify, what are you going to measure your goals by? All right. And then I cannot stress making sure the goal is attainable. Your goals are for you and your company. They're not for anybody else. So many times we try to make a mistake, and we make the mistake and try to have these lofty goals that are really not that attainable. I'm gonna tell you all right now, I would love to make $1 million a day. It would be amazing. I don't know if that's attainable today. It may be in the future, but today I don't think I can do that today. But anything's possible, so I'm open to it. If you all want to give me $1 million, I would definitely receive it. But I have to come up with something that's going to be a little bit more attainable, and then realistic. All right. Once I know that it is attainable, I'm trying to catch up with you all's questions. All right, attainable. Once I know it's attainable, I have to make sure it's relevant. I cannot stress making sure your goals are relevant. If they're not relevant, it's pointless. All right. And once we understand that they're relevant, What is your timetable? My rule of thumb, I'm not a big fan of the 10-year plan, the 15-year plan, you know, those long-term plans. And my reason for saying that is life happens. If you had told me May of 2019 that May of 2020, I'll be in the middle of a pandemic, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. I would have said, we live in the United States of America. It's the greatest country in the world. There's no way something like that will happen. I would have been made a fool, because as we sit here on May the 20th, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we don't know, we still don't have answers. And so if I had this 5-year plan and something like this happened, then what? So I like to do my plans within that quarter, whether it's 90 days, see what do I need to get accomplished these 90 days? Because I feel like that's more controllable, and it gives you a better opportunity to make pivots. If you're not familiar with pivot, get very familiar with pivoting. That is the season that we're in, required of everyone. You look at some of the way we worship now. We worship online. I can sit in my home on Sunday and I can go to about 5 different churches. You couldn't do that last year. January of this year, you couldn't do that. But that's the way it is now, and it's gonna probably be like that for the foreseeable future. So you have to be willing to make that pivot. All right. All right. Any other questions? Well, I hope something was said that you feel like you got your money's worth. I feel like your time was well worth it. All right. Well, it's about 6:45. We've been on here. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to share with you today. If you, Ms. Shorts will share the slides with you. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have more questions, if you want to sit down and have a virtual meeting to talk. Would definitely love to be a resource to you all. I just want to say thank you. And we're going to turn it back over to Melody.